Imagine entering a Roman bath at dusk. The air is thick with perfumed steam, marble columns gleam under the dim light of oil lamps, and the murmur of conversations mingles with the constant sound of running water. There are no clothes, no visible hierarchies, only naked bodies, beads of sweat, and glances meeting through the mist. Senators discuss political strategies, merchants seal deals in whispers, philosophers debate about the soul while discreet slaves move among them offering wine or warm towels. On the surface, everything seems harmonious, a place where the city cleanses itself, where mind and body are purified after the chaos of Rome. But look closely, and you'll notice something else. Behind the laughter and civilized talk, there is tension. In every corner, in every shadow, one can feel desire, power, and fear. Roman baths were much more than spaces for hygiene, they were the social heart of the empire. Political alliances were woven there, business deals were struck, and also betrayals, adulteries, and murders carefully disguised as accidents. The baths were a perfect reflection of Rome itself, majestic on the surface, but full of secrets beneath. The walls listened, the slaves watched, and the water, meant to purify, often became the silent accomplice of the elite's sins. In these places, the line between the sacred and the forbidden blurred. The public became intimate, and the intimate became political. Each bath could be a stage of pleasure or a deadly trap. In the steam, all seemed equal, but they weren't. A misinterpreted gesture, a misplaced word, or a glance held too long could seal anyone's fate. In Rome, even water could be an instrument of power. That's why the baths were not only witnesses of the empire's splendor but also of the darkest side of those who ruled it. Behind the marble, amid the whisper of hot water, were born stories of ambition, desire, and death that still unsettle historians today. And that is where our journey begins, in the heart of that ancient steam, where emperors relaxed, unaware that luxury could become their doom. It was the last night of the year 192. Rome was preparing to celebrate, but inside the imperial palace, an uneasy calm reigned. In one of the private baths of the complex, Emperor Commodus was enjoying his nightly soak. Steam filled the room, obscuring the golden mosaics and the flickering of torches. Outside, the slaves kept silent. No one dared interrupt him. Commodus, son of the great Marcus Aurelius, had become everything his father feared, a capricious man obsessed with his own glory. He had abandoned governance for bodily pleasures and fantasies of power. He believed himself to be the reincarnation of Hercules, appeared in the arena dressed in lion skin, and demanded to be worshipped as a living god. But that god was about to fall. That night, as the emperor immersed himself in the hot water, three people, his lover Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and the praetorian prefect Laetus, had decided that Rome needed to be freed from him. They had already tried to poison him with wine, but the poison failed. Only one method remained, cruder, but certain. They called Narcissus, the emperor's personal trainer, a man accustomed to strength and silence. He entered the room unannounced. The steam was so dense he could barely see the man he was about to kill. Commodus greeted him unsuspectingly, thinking he had come to help him relax before the banquet. Narcissus came up from behind, gripped his neck, and squeezed. The emperor struggled, splashing in the water, but there was no escape. Within seconds, the sound of water was mixed with a muffled gurgle, and then, only silence. The philosopher's son had been strangled in the very bath where he sought peace each night. The marble, the water, and the steam bore witness to an act that would change the fate of the empire. When his body was discovered, no one wept. Rome breathed again. The city had endured years of fear, imperial whims, and arbitrary executions. His death was not a tragedy, it was a liberation. At dawn, the news had not yet spread. The palace remained closed, the water still warm, and the steam drifted over the lifeless body of the man who wanted to be Hercules. The empire, unknowingly, had just entered one of its most chaotic periods, the so-called Year of the Five Emperors. Commodus died as he had lived, surrounded by luxury, false friends, and a power he believed eternal. But neither marble nor gods could save him from the betrayal that, like the steam of his baths, crept silently through every corner of the palace. Faustina the Younger was one of the most enigmatic women of the Roman Empire. Daughter of Emperor Antoninus Pius and wife of Marcus Aurelius, the so-called philosopher-emperor, her image seemed to embody virtue and serenity. Yet behind the marble portraits and official tributes lay a story Rome never forgot, a rumor so disturbing it stained her name for centuries. It was said that Faustina had fallen in love with a gladiator. Not a nobleman or a poet, but an anonymous fighter, scarred, sweating, a man whose life was worth less than the applause of the crowd. According to chroniclers, the empress had seen him in combat and was instantly bewitched. Her passion was so intense that she began to fall ill. Marcus Aurelius, concerned for his wife's health, consulted his Chaldean astrologers. The chronicles tell that their answer was unsettling. Only by bathing in the blood of the man who torments her will she be cured. And so, on a silent and secret night, the gladiator was executed. His body was drained until a private pool in one of the palace baths was filled with his blood. Faustina slowly descended into those crimson waters, obeying the ritual. It is said that when she emerged, pale and trembling, her desire had vanished. That same night, she returned to her husband's bed, and 9 months later, her son Commodus was born. Was that story real? No one knows for sure. Some historians believe it was a myth invented to discredit the future emperor, portraying him as born of sin and blood. Others think it was an allegory, a symbol of the moral corruption that slowly seeped even into the most sacred families of Rome. What is certain is that the rumor outlived the truth. For generations, poets and chroniclers repeated the tale, embellishing it with new details, that the pool was made of black marble, that Faustina wore a golden tunic, that the metallic scent of the steam mingled with the incense of the altars. Perhaps we will never know whether the blood bath was real or a political invention. But Rome loved those kinds of stories, decadent, sensual, cruel. Stories that spoke not only of the excesses of the elite, but of their darkest humanity. Because, in the end, the myth of Faustina reveals something profound about the Roman soul. The need to believe that even the gods of the empire could burn with desire, make mistakes, and pay a terrible price for them. Imagine the scene: the Tyrrhenian Sea crashes against the cliffs of Capri, steam rises from hidden chambers beneath marble slabs, and between columns with frescoes flecked with salt one can barely hear the murmur of water. There, far from the forum and the eyes of the people, Emperor Tiberius turned the private baths of his villas into a parallel universe where power and desire mixed behind closed doors. When, in the year 26 CE, he decided to abandon Rome, it was not a mere whim. Tiberius had grown weary of political poison, of treason trials, maiestas, and of a senate that smiled by day and conspired by night. Capri offered what the capital could not: height, isolation, and control. From Villa Jovis, a fortress of terraces, cisterns, and bath halls connected by corridors, he ruled by letter while Rome burned with rumors. In that setting of heated marble, the stories that would haunt him forever were born. Suetonius tells that the emperor ordered private pools to be fitted with hypocaust heating and restricted access. The ritual was unchanging: discreet musicians at the threshold, trusted slaves controlling the flow of steam, and a small circle of attendants who quickly learned that looking was permitted, speaking was not. From there, ancient chroniclers, many of them hostile, built a portrait that verged on the unspeakable. There were tales that Tiberius kept a group of little fishes, young people trained for aquatic games who entertained him as he soaked in the warm pools. There was talk of erotic pantomimes, of tablets with educational scenes, of an emperor who used water and steam as a curtain for acts that today would seem unbearable. How much of it to believe? Even modern historians admit it plainly: much of it may have been propaganda. Suetonius writes with a moralizing hand, and Tacitus, more restrained, only hints at what others shouted. But rumor, in politics, often weighs more than proof. What is beyond doubt is the architecture of secrecy. The baths of Capri were not simple humid chambers, they were intimate theaters. The underfloor heating allowed precise temperature control, from the suffocating caldarium to the mild tepidarium, and the separation of rooms ensured that no one had a full view of what was happening. Water, which in Rome served to socialize, here became a curtain. In an empire obsessed with the visibility of power, Tiberius chose to make himself invisible, the emperor as a shadow amid clouds of steam. That retreat had political costs. From Capri, Tiberius fostered, or tolerated, a culture of informers that reeked of fear in Rome. Each imperial letter was a verdict. And the more the stories of excess grew in the villas, the easier it was to portray him as a distant ogre who had traded the steel of the camp for the silence of the bath. The contrast was lethal to his image, from austere general to clandestine hedonist, from the discipline of Germania to the coastal softness of Capri. Were there abuses? It is hard to deny. The Roman world was riddled with power relations that we now openly condemn, and the thermal space, private, hierarchical, controlled, was the perfect container for excesses without witnesses. But it must also be said, the Tiberius of Capri is, in part, a literary creation. His enemies needed a monster. And there is no monster more effective than the one who hides in the baths, where nothing leaves a trace, no blood, no screams, only steam. Still, some traces did survive. The remains of Villa Jovis confirm complex hydraulic systems and bath halls built for imperial isolation. Sources mention decorated rooms and rigid service protocols. Everything suggests a ruler who turned hygiene into a frontier, inside, obedience and pleasure, outside, distance and fear. That design was no accident. In a culture that saw the bath as a civic space, Tiberius turned it into an instrument of power. Water no longer united, it divided. The end of his reign confirmed the paradox. He died in his bed, far from the clamor of a people who never saw him up close again. When news descended from Capri to the coast, Rome did not know whether to feel relieved or unsettled. The legend had already done its work. Tiberius was forever fixed as the emperor who traded the forum for the caldarium, public virtue for the damp secrecy of an island. Perhaps that is the key to understanding why his name always resurfaces when we speak of scandals in the baths. Not because all that was written is true, but because Capri embodies the very idea of unchecked power when no one is watching. A bath can be a reward of civilization or an alibi for impunity. With Tiberius, it was both at once. At first glance, the Roman public baths were a monument to civilization, grand complexes where white marble gleamed under torchlight, vaults echoed with conversation, and the air was thick with the scent of olive oil and steam. But behind that facade of order and cleanliness lay another universe, one where desire and transgression coexisted under the same roof as civility and hygiene. Every afternoon, when the sun descended over the hills of the Aventine, thousands of Romans flocked to these temples of the body. In the frigidarium, the cold water closed the pores after exercise, in the tepidarium, conversations mixed with laughter and murmurs, and in the caldarium, the steam made the silhouettes blur like living shadows. There, among the heat, the naked bodies and the lost gazes, the boundaries between what was allowed and what was forbidden slowly began to fade. For centuries, mixed baths, spaces shared by men and women, were a tolerated practice in many cities of the empire. What for the Romans was part of everyday life, for the moralists was the reflection of an inevitable decadence. Martial, always sarcastic, joked about the charms that could be admired without pain. But Juvenal and Seneca, more severe, furiously denounced what they called the markets of pleasure under the marble. And they were not without reasons to be scandalized. In the baths, the social hierarchy dissolved. Patricians and slaves, senators and plebeians, all shared the same space, naked, vulnerable, equal for a few moments. For some it was a symbol of refinement, for others, of danger. The satirical poets described how high society ladies came with imported perfumes, jewels on their ankles, and tunics so light that they barely concealed anything. The men, for their part, competed to show off well-groomed bodies, smelling of rose oil and expensive wine. In that environment where the body was shown without masks, the gaze was the first contact, and often the prelude to something more. The public baths became fertile ground for insinuations and clandestine affairs. The dressing rooms and secondary corridors served as shelter for fleeting encounters, while the slaves pretended not to see. In some larger complexes, archaeologists have discovered closed rooms with stone beds and frescoes of erotic content, a clue suggesting that pleasure and cleanliness shared the same space without shame. Emperor Hadrian, alarmed by spreading rumors, tried to ban mixed baths, citing moral reasons. Years later, Marcus Aurelius and Alexander Severus would do the same, but the laws failed to eradicate the custom. The people did not want to give up such an everyday pleasure. The imperial decrees clashed with a stronger reality. In Rome, the body was not the enemy of the soul, but its mirror. The chronicles mention curious cases. On an inscription found in Pompeii one can read a warning: whoever seeks pleasure in the bath will pay double. And yet, the frescoes found in Pompeian baths seem to contradict the notice. They show numbered scenes of couples in intimate postures, painted with such detail that many believe they served as a visual catalog for visitors. In some establishments, there were even brothels on the upper floors, discreetly connected to the bathing areas. Pleasure, commerce, and hygiene formed an inseparable triad in Roman urban life. Women, especially those of high class, were objects of fascination and criticism. It was said that some came to the baths only to be seen, wrapped in transparent gauzes or with elaborate hairstyles that resisted the steam. The moralists accused them of indecency, but the reality was more complex. In a world dominated by men, the bath offered women a rare space of autonomy, where they could decide with whom to talk, what to look at, and how to show themselves. What men called debauchery might simply have been freedom. For the Christian Church, which would later inherit the ruins of the empire, the baths became a symbol of corruption. The councils and the fathers of the Church condemned those places for promoting lust and temptation. But during the centuries of imperial splendor, Rome saw no contradiction. Washing the body, enjoying the senses, and conversing among equals were part of the same culture that built aqueducts and temples. And yet, beneath the columns and mosaics, the line between the public and the intimate blurred. There were born romances, conspiracies, betrayals. The steam was an accomplice, the water, a witness. The baths did not only purify the body, they also revealed the hidden desires of a society that, even in its splendor, remained profoundly human. Rome had learned to disguise horror with marble. The gleaming walls, the perfumes of aromatic oils, and the sound of running water could conceal any crime, even that of an empress. Octavia, daughter of Emperor Claudius and legitimate wife of Nero, was one of the most tragic figures of the 1st century. Raised in sobriety, a symbol of Roman virtue, she was given in marriage to a young man who, in time, would turn her love into condemnation. What began as a political alliance between dynasties ended in a silent nightmare inside the imperial palace. During the first years, Octavia silently endured her husband's infidelities and eccentricities. Rome admired her, her face appeared on coins, her name was synonymous with purity. But Nero, blinded by desire for his lover Poppaea Sabina, began to see her as an obstacle. A chaste wife did not fit with the new cult of sensuality that the emperor wanted to impose on all of Rome. Thus, little by little, virtue became suspect. First came the rumors, that Octavia was sterile, that she conspired with slaves, that she had been unfaithful. Lies carefully sown by Poppaea, according to the chronicles, to destroy her. Nero pretended to doubt, but he had already made his decision. The night of her fall was as elegant as it was cruel. A group of centurions burst into the villa where Octavia was confined under the pretext of political precaution. They communicated to her the imperial verdict: she had to die. But not in public, not before the people who loved her. Nero wanted a discreet end, without witnesses, without visible blood. She was led to a specially prepared steam room. The heat of the caldarium was suffocating, the air dense, heavy with incense and humidity. The walls, which had once witnessed laughter and perfumes, became accomplices to the execution. Ancient sources, including Tacitus himself, report that she was ordered to have her veins opened, as if it were an honorable suicide. But the steam thickened the air, and her death was slow, suffocating, as if the bath itself were devouring her. As Octavia's body collapsed onto the marble, the steam enveloped the scene, silencing the screams. No executioner raised his sword. No witness spoke. Only the boiling water and the whisper of the heat marked the end of a woman born for the throne who died without uttering a single word of defense. When the news reached the people of Rome, outrage was immediate. Crowds left flowers in front of the palace, demanding justice for their empress. But Nero responded with terrifying coldness. He forbade any public lament and ordered her name to be erased from inscriptions and portraits. It was the damnatio memoriae, the final death, forced oblivion. Still, Octavia's memory survived. Historians preserved her as a symbol of innocence destroyed by power. Her execution within a bathhouse was more than murder, it was a declaration of imperial perversion. Where Romans once purified their bodies, Nero had turned the steam into an instrument of punishment. The baths, which represented the refinement of Rome, were transformed into a theater of intimate horror. The very place where elites discussed politics and philosophy was used to erase a life. In that contrast, between beauty and brutality, between marble and death, the true face of the empire is revealed, a world where even luxury could be lethal. As Rome grew accustomed to her emperor's excesses, a female figure emerged as the embodiment of luxury, ambition, and absolute beauty, Poppaea Sabina, the woman who conquered Nero not only with her charm but with her ability to turn vanity into art. Poppaea was unlike any other. The daughter of an aristocratic family, intelligent, calculating, and possessing almost hypnotic magnetism, she understood from a young age that at the imperial court, beauty could be more powerful than an army. Her skin, according to Pliny the Elder and Suetonius, was so pale and luminous it seemed sculpted from alabaster. But her secret was not divine, it lay in her bath. She did not bathe in water. She bathed in milk. And not just any milk, but donkey's milk, carefully collected each morning by a retinue of over 300 donkeys that followed her everywhere. Every day at dawn, slaves prepared her bath in a special room of the palace, a white marble chamber with Corinthian columns, silver basins, and oil lamps that cast golden reflections over the surface of the warm milk. The ritual began in near-religious silence. The air filled with aromas of honey, roses, and myrrh. Poppaea slowly descended into the bathtub, while two maidservants rubbed her with essential oils and lotus petals. She believed this bath kept her skin smooth, wrinkle-free, and worthy of a goddess. According to Pliny, she claimed that donkey's milk restored lost youth and erased the marks of time. Yet behind that ethereal image lay something deeper, the power of appearance. In a Rome that revered strength and discipline, Poppaea introduced a new kind of dominion, that of the body and seduction. Her bath was as much a political act as it was an aesthetic one. While senators debated laws and soldiers fought on distant frontiers, she ruled from the intimacy of scented steam. Chroniclers of the time were divided, some called her a symbol of refinement, others of moral corruption. For moralists, wasting milk, a vital food for the people, on beauty rituals was sacrilege. But for her admirers, that excess represented imperial Rome at its height, when even vanity had statues and attendants. It was said that Poppaea emerged from the bath with skin so soft that Nero compared it to freshly polished wax. And while he plunged the empire into chaos, she governed his senses with a whisper. The empress knew that luxury was a form of dominion, those who could waste without guilt demonstrated that they were above all. Yet the same milk that made her shine was also a symbol of her fragility. Years later, Poppaea would die tragically, a victim of Nero's rage, some say from a kick, others from a violent quarrel. Her body, once worshipped as a work of art, became a symbol of the price paid by those who lived under the whims of human gods. Poppaea's baths were not forgotten. For centuries, they became the emblem of imperial decadence, the perfect image of a civilization that, among marble and perfumes, began to crumble from within. The milk-scented steam that once perfumed the palace corridors remained in the memory of Rome as a warning, even pleasure can be a prelude to ruin. Emperor Constantine the Great went down in history as the man who brought the cross to the heart of the empire, who legalized Christianity, and who dreamed of a renewed Rome under the light of a new faith. But even during the reign of the Holy Emperor, there were shadows as dense as the marble that adorned his baths. In one of them, amidst steam and silence, his wife Fausta would meet her death in a scene that combined personal tragedy with the relentless power of imperial politics. Fausta was no ordinary woman. Daughter of Emperor Maximian, wife of Constantine, and mother of 3 imperial children, she represented the continuity of a dynasty. She was intelligent, ambitious, and, according to the chronicles, capable of pulling the strings of power with the same subtlety with which a priestess manipulates incense on an altar. For years, she was his ally, his advisor, and his shield. Until a rumor changed everything. The year was 326 AD. Crispus, Constantine's eldest son from a previous marriage, had been executed on charges of treason. No one knew why. Some said he had conspired against the throne, others claimed he had fallen victim to a fabricated accusation, and that the hand behind this lie was Fausta's. It was said that she had insinuated that Crispus had seduced her, seeking to eliminate the heir to secure the future of her own children. What happened next was as sudden as it was brutal. Shortly after Crispus's death, Fausta was secretly arrested. There was no trial, no public accusation, no witnesses. Only an imperial order and a fate sealed within the marble walls of the palace. According to historians Eusebius and Zosimus, she was taken to a caldarium, an overheated steam room. There, in the shadows, the slaves locked the doors and stoked the fire. The heat began to rise. The air grew thick, the marble burned. Drops of steam fell on her skin like needles. Fausta realized she would not leave. There were no screams, no witnesses. Only the hiss of evaporating water and the silence of a woman who had once been Empress of Rome. When it was over, her body was removed in secret. Constantine never spoke of the event. He ordered her name erased from inscriptions, her portraits destroyed, and any mention of her removed from official documents. The damnatio memoriae, the condemnation to oblivion, became her second death. Yet the echo of that deadly steam survived the passage of time. Because even in an empire that proclaimed itself Christian, power continued to act with the same pagan ferocity as always. Some Christian chroniclers tried to justify the act, saying that Fausta had sinned. Others remained silent out of fear or convenience. But history preserves a troubling message. Even in the Rome of forgiveness and faith, no one was safe from the fire of power. With Fausta's death, Constantine sealed not only the fate of his family but also that of his own legend. His empire was left divided between the light of the cross and the shadows of the caldarium where his wife died. That bath, meant to purify the body, became a symbol of political sin, of the secrets that boil beneath the surface of marble. And so, amidst steam, heat, and silence, Rome once again revealed its most human and darkest face. Because in the baths where bodies sought rest, power always found its best disguise.